Good morning. Before we get to Hebrews chapter 11 and talk about the Hall of Faith, we're going to talk about where that person came from. Judges chapter 4. Actually, it's Judges chapter 4 and 5, but the main story happens in Judges chapter 4. It starts with a familiar line. The people of Israel rebelled against God. They did evil in the sight of God. Time and time again, the people of Israel turned their back on Him. The one person you shouldn't turn your back on is God. And they did it time and time and time again. This time they end up being held captive by the Canaanites. The Canaanites were led by a great king, had a great army. The army was led by a man named Sisera. And under his command he had 900 chariots. That would be the equivalent of 900 tanks in his army. And that's not even counting his foot soldiers. Massive, massive army. They were controlling all of the Israelites. They held them as slaves. After 20 years of oppression, God raised up a judge, a woman, a prophetess, Deborah. The people came to Deborah for any dispute they had, and she ruled over them generously, favorably, but more importantly, the way God called her to lead. She was a great judge, and she led the people of Israel. One day, the Lord appeared to Deborah and said, Deborah, I want you to go and prepare a man for battle, that he's going to lead my people into battle against the Canaanites and against Sisera, and I'm going to lead them to victory. So Deborah went to a man named Barak and said, Barak, the Lord has appeared to me, and he's given me a message. You're to go and get 10,000 fighting men, and you're going to lead them into battle. And you're going to defeat Sisera, and you're going to set the people free. You are going to be the leader of the army, of the God's army. Barak hemmed and hawed and said, I'll go. I'll do it. But I want you to go with me. I'll only go fight if you're by my side. And she said, I'll go with you, of course. But just know that since I'm going with you, you're not going to get credit for the victory. They're not going to be singing your praises. It's going to be the woman that gets the praise for this. They go to battle. Barak, he gathers up 10,000 fighting men, and they go down to the base of Mount Tabor. And they get there, and the Canaanites are down the valley, and they're massive amounts of chariots and foot soldiers, and the war is getting ready to start. And it tells us that the stars fight for God's army, the Israelites. Most experts believe this is what this means is the clouds opened up and it rained. The chariots got stuck in the mud. And the army of God, the Israelites, led by Barak, go down and they fight. And it tells us that there's not any soldier left standing of the Canaanites. That Barak's army won. They defeated them with Deborah by his side. But Sisera, he escaped. He fled, and he got out of town, and he came to a tent of a woman named Jael. And he came in, and she said, Lord, I'll protect you. I'll keep you safe. I won't let anything harm you. Nothing will happen to you under my watch. Lie down. And she took a blanket and covered him. And he said, I'm thirsty. And she brought him a jug of milk. And he drank. And he was so exhausted he fell asleep. And then Jael took a tent peg and a hammer and put that puppy right through the temple of Sisera. It might be one of the coolest stories in all the Bible. Pretty soon, Barak shows up at the tent, and she goes out and greets him and says, you got to come in here and see what I did. And so Barak walks in, and he sees Sisera lying there with a tent peg shoved through the temple of his head. Dead. The battle was over. The Israelites were set free once again. Now, we look at that story. You got Deborah being risen up, a prophetess, a leader, a judge that all the men and women came to for their problems, who went with Barak to the battle, who fought right beside, who stood there and watched and gave approval. You got Barak, who is a leader of God's army, called by God, but wouldn't go to battle alone. Wouldn't fight without Deborah by his side. And you got Jael. She's a pretty fierce woman. Remind me not to cross her. Now, one of those three is listed in Hebrews chapter 11 as having great faith. Hebrews chapter 11 verse 32, we'll pick up where we left off. It says, "And what more shall I say, for time would fail me to tell of Gideon and Barak, the one who wouldn't go to battle without Deborah by his side, the one who shows up to the tent after chasing Sisera only to find that a woman had killed his foe, the one who showed weakness, who showed, honestly, a lack of faith in God. Deborah came to him and said, God has come to me and said that you're going to lead his army. I mean, I'll go, but only if you're with me. That's faith. That's worthy of getting put in the hall of faith. Really, the only other time we hear of Barak is Samuel mentions him once in passing, but the follow-up chapter to Judges chapter 4, Judges chapter 5, Deborah has a song, and she talks about the great things that God has done in this battle. And she mentions Barak being led by God. See, Barak overcame his, what we call weakness. But honestly, I think it was more meekness than weakness. He looked at the battle and said, I need God with me. This woman is a prophet of God. She's a leader for God, and I want her by my side as I go into battle. But even if it was weakness, I'm okay with that too. I don't care what his reasoning was. What I know is this. When the time came, he was ready to fight. Because he knew who the battles belonged to. He knew that the war wasn't his. He knew the war wasn't Deborah's. The war wasn't Sisera's. The battle was the Lord's. The battle was God's. Deuteronomy chapter 20, verse 1 through 4 read like this. When you go out to war against your enemies and you see horses and chariots and the army larger than your own, you shall not be afraid of them. For the Lord your God is with you, who brought you up out of the land of Egypt. And when you draw near to the battle, the priest shall come forward and speak to the people, and shall say to them, Hear, O Israel, today you are drawing near for battle against your enemies. Let not your heart faint. Do not fear, or panic, or be in dread of them. For the Lord your God is he who goes with you, to fight for you against your enemies, to give you the victory. So many times we go through life fighting battles, fighting wars, fighting daily issues, just going through the grind. And it's tough, and we get wore down, and we get beat up, and we get distraught because we're trying to do it alone. We're trying to fight for ourselves. And what the story of Barak and what the author of Deuteronomy here is telling me is God's fighting for me. And God's fighting for you. Don't worry about the battle at hand. Don't worry about what's going on around you. Trust in God. That was Barak's weakness, was he wanted proof that God was with him. And in his heart, he should have known, if God's calling me to it, he's going to get me through it. If he's going to be there telling me to fight, then he's going to be fighting for me. And that's how we got to handle life. That's how we got to handle every situation we face day in and day out, knowing that no matter what we do, no matter where we go, God is fighting for us. And he already knows the outcome. Not only for our lives, but for the world and the future of the world. I've read the back of the book. Revelation tells us very clearly, God wins. He knows it. Satan knows it. When are we going to learn it? When are we going to rely on him to do it? But we say, well, I feel alone, or I feel distraught, I feel like nobody cares, or I'm in this battle by myself. God has forsaken me. God has not forsaken you. God has not left you. God has not forgotten you. He's right there with you, day in, day out, pushing for you. Sometimes pushing you to be the best person you can be. My favorite passages in all the scriptures. Psalm 121. It says, I lift up my eyes to the hills, from where does my help come? My help comes from the Lord, who made the heaven and the earth. He will not let your foot be moved. He who keeps you will not slumber. Behold, he who keeps Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord is your keeper. The Lord is your shade on your right hand. The sun shall not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all evil. He will keep your life. The Lord will keep your going out and your coming in from this time forth forevermore. And I love that passage because it's very simple. I may get tired and I may get wore down and I might get dismayed. God doesn't. He doesn't take a nap. He doesn't get sleepy. He fights. And he's watching over you. And he'll take care of you and protect you, if you'll get out of your own way and let him fight for you. Another one of my favorite passages, and I'm going to close with this. Exodus chapter 14, verse 14. The Lord will fight for you. You only have to be silent. The battle is the Lord's. If and when you put your trust in him, knowing that he is in control, knowing that he is guiding you, knowing that he is leading you, knowing that he is fighting tooth and nail for you, all you got to do is be quiet. Let him do what he does. He'll be him, you be you. At the end of the day, if that's the way you're living your life, it's going to be a good day. Have a great week.